Chapter 1. The journey south the morning mist still clung to the cobblestones of Manchester as Daniel hurried toward the bus station, his small holdall bouncing against his hip with each eager step. At 17, he'd grown tall and lean, all angles and nervous energy, but today his usual awkwardness was softened by genuine excitement. A whole week with Aunt Sarah, it felt like the best kind of escape. As Daniel climbed aboard the London bus and found his seat by the window, memories of his aunt danced through his mind like sunlight through leaves. He could almost smell her lavender perfume, hear her warm laughter that always made everything seem possible. "Oh, my dear Daniel," she'd said during their last phone call, her voice rich with affection. "I can't wait to spoil you properly. We'll have such lovely chats, and I'll make all your favourite food." Even as a child, Daniel had felt something special about Aunt Sarah's house, a sense of safety he'd never quite found elsewhere. While his parents loved him deeply, their world felt rigid sometimes, full of expectations he couldn't always meet. But with Sarah, he could simply be. She had this way of looking at him, really seeing him, that made his chest warm with belonging. The bus pulled away from the station, and Manchester's landscape gradually gave way to rolling hills and patches of woodland. Daniel pressed his forehead to the cool glass, watching the world blur past in shades of green and gold. In just a matter of hours, he'd be wrapped in one of Sarah's fierce hugs, probably being fussed over and fed biscuits before his feet even touched her doormat. He'd been planning this visit for months, saving up his pocket money and marking days off the calendar with the dedication of someone counting down to Christmas. His parents had been surprisingly supportive. Perhaps they sensed how much he needed this break, this chance to breathe in a different kind of air. The journey stretched on, stations coming and going in a rhythm that lulled Daniel into a peaceful daydream. He imagined walks through Sarah's garden, where she grew the most magnificent roses he'd ever seen. He pictured evenings curled up in her sitting room, sharing stories over steaming mugs of cocoa while rain pattered against the windows. Most of all, he looked forward to those quiet conversations they always seemed to fall into, the kind where Sarah would listen with her whole heart and somehow make him feel like his thoughts and feelings mattered more than anything in the world. London's sprawling outskirts began to appear, a maze of houses and roads that seemed to go on forever. Daniel's stomach fluttered with anticipation as the coach began to slow. Soon he'd see that familiar face, those kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. The terminal was exactly as overwhelming as Daniel had expected, a chaos of people, and announcements and rumbling engines that made his head spin. He joined the queue at the luggage bay, bouncing slightly on his toes as he waited for his turn. When the attendant handed him a navy blue holdall, Daniel barely glanced at it before slinging it over his shoulder. It looked right enough, and he was far too eager to see Sarah to pay much attention to such details. "Daniel, oh my darling boy." Her voice cut through the crowd like a warm embrace, and there she was, silver hair catching the afternoon light, arms already reaching for him. Daniel dropped his bag and practically flew into her hug, breathing in that familiar scent of lavender and home-baked bread that always clung to her cardigans. "Let me look at you," Sarah said, holding him at arm's length with tears of joy brightening her eyes. "My goodness, you've grown so tall and so handsome. I swear you look more like your mother every time I see you." Something about that comment made Daniel's cheeks warm, in a way he couldn't quite explain, but Sarah was already bustling him toward the car park, chattering about all the things she'd planned for their week together. The drive out of the city and through the countryside was everything Daniel had hoped for. Windows down, warm air streaming through his hair, and Sarah's gentle chatter filling the comfortable space between them. She asked about school, about his friends, about the stories he'd been writing, treating each answer like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. "And how are your parents, darling?" "Still working themselves to the bone, I expect." "They're well," Daniel replied, settling deeper into the passenger seat. "Mum sends her love. Dad's been promoted again." "Of course he has. Your father was always destined for great things, though I do hope they remember to look after themselves, and you in all that success." There was something in her tone, a gentle concern, that made Daniel feel seen in a way that squeezed his heart just right. This was why he'd needed this visit so desperately. Here, with Sarah, he could just be Daniel without having to worry about being the right kind of Daniel for anyone else. As they turned into her lane, past the stone wall covered in climbing roses, Daniel felt that familiar sense of coming home settle over his shoulders like the softest blanket. The cottage looked exactly the same cream-coloured walls, dark timber beams, and window boxes overflowing with colourful blooms that seemed to smile in the afternoon sun. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, and Daniel knew she meant it in all the ways that mattered most. Inside, the house wrapped around him like a hug, all warm wood and soft fabrics, and the lingering smell of something delicious baking in the kitchen. Sarah immediately set about making him comfortable, fluffing cushions and asking if he needed anything, her joy at having him there, radiating from every gesture. "I've put you in your usual room, of course, the blue one with the window that looks out over the garden. I've put up fresh curtains, I thought you might like them." Daniel felt his throat tighten with gratitude. Even after all this time, she'd kept a room just for him, decorated it with care and thought for his visits. It was more than kindness. It was love made tangible, shaped into soft pillows and carefully chosen colours. "Thank you, Aunt Sarah, for everything. I've missed this place so much." "Oh, darling boy," she said, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from his forehead with a special kind of tenderness. "You never need to thank me for loving you. That's what family does. We create safe harbours for each other, places where we can rest and just be ourselves." As evening fell and they sat together in her cosy sitting room, Daniel felt something inside him unclench for the first time in months. Here, in the golden glow of Sarah's table lamps, surrounded by the warmth of unconditional love, he could finally breathe deeply again. He had no idea that by tomorrow evening, this feeling of safety would become the foundation for discoveries that would change his understanding of himself forever. For now, it was enough to be here, to be cherished exactly as he was, and to know that whatever came next, he wouldn't have to face it alone. Chapter 2. The mix-up the first evening at Sarah's cottage unfolded exactly as Daniel had dreamed it would. They shared a hearty dinner of shepherd's pie, his absolute favourite, while Sarah regaled him with stories about her neighbours' escaped chickens and the drama surrounding the village's annual flower show. Her laughter was infectious, and Daniel found himself relaxing completely for the first time in months. "Now then, my dear," Sarah said as she cleared their plates, "I know you must be exhausted from that long journey. Why don't you get settled upstairs while I make us some cocoa? We can have a proper catch-up tomorrow when you've had a good rest." Daniel nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of how heavy his eyelids had become. The emotional relief of being here, combined with the long day of travel, was catching up with him all at once. He kissed Sarah's cheek, something that felt perfectly natural in this house, where affection flowed as freely as the tea, and headed upstairs with his holdall. The blue bedroom was exactly as he remembered, only better. Soft afternoon light filtered through the new curtains Sarah had mentioned, casting everything in a gentle, dreamy glow. The bed looked impossibly inviting with its thick duvet and pile of cushions, and fresh flowers from the garden sat in a small vase on the windowsill. She really did think of everything, Daniel murmured to himself, setting his bag on the floor by the window. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh linen, Sarah's signature touches that made every space feel like a warm embrace. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just taking it all in. Through the window, he could see Sarah's garden stretching out in the twilight, her roses already heavy with blooms, despite it being early summer. A sense of profound contentment settled over him, the kind of peace he'd been craving without even realizing it. Finally rousing himself, Daniel reached for the holdall zipper. All he wanted was to find his pajamas and sink into that impossibly comfortable-looking bed. But as the bag fell open, his contentment evaporated in an instant. Pink fabric spilled out first, something silky and delicate that definitely wasn't his. Then came a floral cosmetics bag, a pair of strappy sandals with a small heel, and what appeared to be a lacy white garment that made Daniel's cheeks burn just looking at it. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. With trembling hands, he rifled through the bag's contents, desperately hoping to find even one item that belonged to him. Instead, he discovered a world of feminine belongings, soft sweaters in pastel colours, skirts, delicate undergarments, bottles of perfume, and jewellery that caught the lamplight like tiny stars. At the bottom of the bag, his worst fears were confirmed when he found a student ID card bearing the name Rebecca Morrison and the photo of a smiling young woman about his own age. Daniel sank onto the bed, the ID card trembling in his hand. Somewhere in London, Rebecca Morrison was probably having exactly the same horrible realisation about his bag full of boring t-shirts and worn jeans. The thought of a stranger handling his threadbare underwear and faded comic book shirts made him want to disappear into the floorboards. Daniel? Coca's ready, love. Sarah's cheerful voice drifted up from the kitchen. Panic seized him. What was he supposed to tell her? That he'd somehow managed to mess up something as simple as collecting his own luggage? That he was stranded with nothing but the clothes on his back and a bag full of women's belongings? Sarah had been so excited to have him here, had made such wonderful plans, and now he'd ruined everything before the first day was even over. Coming. He called back, his voice cracking slightly. He shoved Rebecca's belongings back into the bag with shaking hands, trying to restore some semblance of order to the chaos. Downstairs, Sarah was waiting in her cozy sitting room with 2 steaming mugs and a plate of homemade biscuits. She looked so pleased, so content in her role as the perfect hostess, that Daniel's heart nearly broke with disappointment, both his own and what he was about to cause her. There you are. I made your favourite extra marshmallows, just like when you were little. She patted the cushion beside her on the sofa. Come sit with me, darling. You look like you've seen a ghost. Daniel perched on the edge of the sofa, accepting the warm mug with hands that he hoped weren't shaking too obviously. Aunt Sarah, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Her expression shifted immediately to one of gentle concern. What's wrong, sweetheart? Whatever it is, I'm sure we can sort it out. The kindness in her voice nearly undid him completely. Daniel took a shaky breath and launched into the mortifying tale of the luggage mix-up, watching Sarah's face for signs of disappointment or frustration. But instead of the annoyance he expected, her expression grew thoughtful, almost amused. Oh, my dear boy, she said when he'd finished his confession. Is that all? Here I was, thinking something truly dreadful had happened. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Luggage mix-ups happen all the time, especially at busy stations like that one. It's not the end of the world. But I don't have anything to wear, Daniel said miserably. No pajamas, no clean clothes for tomorrow. I've ruined our whole week. Sarah's laugh was like warm honey. Ruined our week? Oh, Daniel, you sweet, silly boy. Do you think I care what you're wearing? The only thing that matters to me is having you here, safe and sound. She stood up, brushing off her skirt with characteristic efficiency. Now, let's think practically about this. What did you say the girl's name was? Rebecca. Rebecca Morrison. She had a student ID from Durham University. Right. We'll call the bus company first thing tomorrow morning and sort this out properly. I'm sure she's just as eager to get her things back as you are. Sarah moved toward the stairs, gesturing for Daniel to follow. But for tonight, we need to find you something to sleep in. I could just sleep in my clothes, Daniel offered weakly. Absolutely not. You'll be miserable, and these things are meant to be washed. They'd reached the landing, and Sarah paused outside a door Daniel had never seen opened. Now, I hope you won't think this too terribly improper, but Kirsty left quite a few things here when she went back to university. She's about your size, maybe a bit smaller, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you borrowed something for the night. Daniel's cheeks burned. Kirsty was Sarah's daughter, only a year older than him, and the thought of wearing her clothes felt impossibly intimate and embarrassing. That wouldn't be right, darling, Sarah said, turning to face him fully, her hands gentle on his shoulders. There's nothing wrong with fabric, no matter who it was originally intended for. Clothes are just cloth and thread. They don't have gender. Only people do. Her smile was infinitely understanding. Besides, it's just us here. No one else will ever know. And I promise you, I couldn't care less. What matters is that you're comfortable and get a good night's sleep. Something in her tone, the complete absence of judgment or mockery, made Daniel's panic begin to ebb. This was Aunt Sarah, who had never made him feel foolish or ashamed about anything. If she said it was all right, perhaps it truly was. Are you sure Kirsty wouldn't mind? My darling girl would be delighted to help you out of a jam. She's always been generous with her things, especially with family. Sarah opened the door to reveal a bright, cheerful room with flower print curtains and a wardrobe that stood slightly ajar. Now, let's see what we can find that might work. As they stood at the threshold of Kirsty's room, Daniel felt something shift inside him. A curious mixture of nervousness and something else he couldn't quite name. It felt like standing at the edge of unknown territory, both frightening and strangely compelling. It's going to be all right, sweetheart, Sarah said softly, as if she could read his thoughts. Sometimes life gives us unexpected situations, and all we can do is meet them with grace and an open mind. Who knows? You might even find this little adventure has something to teach you. Daniel looked at his aunt's kind face, seeing nothing but love and acceptance there, and felt his shoulders relax for the first time since opening that confusing bag. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't have to face it alone. And somehow, with Sarah beside him, even the most mortifying situation felt manageable. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what we can find." Chapter 3. First Steps. Kirsty's wardrobe was a revelation of colour and softness that made Daniel feel like he'd wandered into an entirely different world. Sarah moved through it with the practiced efficiency of a mother who had helped her daughter organise these very clothes, her fingers trailing along fabric as she considered options. "Now, let's see what might work best for you, darling. We want you to be comfortable." She pulled out a few items, holding them up against Daniel's frame with the critical eye of someone who understood fit and proportion. "Kirsty's a bit shorter than you, but I think we can manage." Daniel watched in fascination as Sarah selected what she deemed the least girly options from the collection. A soft lilac sweater that looked impossibly cozy, and a pair of jeans with delicate butterfly embroidery along the seams that caught the light when she moved them. Even these supposedly understated choices seemed impossibly feminine to his eyes. "These should do nicely," Sarah announced, laying the clothes on Kirsty's bed. "The sweater's a lovely soft cotton blend, much nicer than those rough things boys usually wear. And these jeans have a bit of stretch to them, so they should accommodate your longer legs. They have butterflies on them," Daniel said weakly, as if this observation might change everything. Sarah's laugh was gentle and understanding. "They do indeed. Kirsty's always loved butterflies," says they remind her that beautiful transformations are possible. She moved to the dresser, pulling open the top drawer with matter-of-fact efficiency. "Now you'll need undergarments as well. I know it seems terribly strange, but fabric is fabric, dear one." Daniel's face burned as she selected items from Kirsty's carefully organised drawer, but Sarah's completely practical approach somehow made it feel less mortifying. She was treating this like any other household problem to be solved, a leaky tap or a burnt dinner, rather than something shameful or shocking. "There we are. A proper nightie as well. This one's quite modest. More like a long shirt, really." She handed him a flowing garment in soft lavender that felt like silk between his fingers. "I'll leave you to get changed, sweetheart. Just call if you need anything at all." After Sarah closed the door behind her with a gentle click, Daniel stood alone in the flower-scented room, holding clothes that seemed to shimmer with possibility and terror in equal measure. His reflection in Kirsty's mirror looked back at him, tall, awkward, completely out of place among the feminine touches that surrounded him. "It's just for tonight," he whispered to himself, "just until we can sort this out." But as he slowly undressed and pulled on the borrowed clothes, something unexpected happened. The sweater was indeed incredibly soft, wrapping around him like a gentle hug. The jeans, despite their delicate embroidery, fit surprisingly well, the stretch fabric accommodating his frame in a way his usual stiff denim never did. When he caught sight of himself in the mirror, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The person looking back at him was still recognisably him, but somehow softer. The lilac brought out warmth in his complexion he'd never noticed, and the fitted cut of the jeans created a silhouette that was entirely foreign, yet strangely right. "Daniel, how are you managing up there?" Sarah's voice drifted up from the landing. "Fine," he called back, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Everything fits well enough." "Wonderful. Don't forget to brush your teeth, darling. There's a spare toothbrush in the bathroom cabinet." Later that night, the nighttime routine felt surreal, padding around Sarah's cottage in borrowed clothes that whispered against his skin with each movement. The nightgown she'd selected hung loose and comfortable around his frame, the fabric so soft it felt like wearing a cloud. When Daniel finally slipped between the covers of the guest bed, he expected to lie awake for hours, too uncomfortable and self-conscious to sleep. Instead, he found himself relaxing into the pillows with a sense of ease that surprised him completely. The nightgown's gentle weight, the way the fabric moved with him rather than constraining him, it all felt oddly natural. "Just for tonight," he repeated to himself as his eyes grew heavy. But even as sleep claimed him, a small part of his mind wondered why something that should have felt so wrong instead felt like the softest kind of coming home. Morning light filtered through the blue bedroom's curtains, warm and golden and full of promise. Daniel woke slowly, luxuriously, feeling more rested than he had in months. For a blissful moment, he forgot entirely about the previous evening's drama, stretching contentedly in the soft sheets. Then he felt the whisper of lavender fabric against his skin, and remembered everything at once. He sat up quickly, looking down at himself in the delicate nightgown, and waited for the crushing embarrassment to hit. Instead, He felt only a strange, quiet curiosity. In the morning light, wearing Kirsty's clothes didn't feel like the catastrophe he'd expected. It just felt different, soft, rather nice actually. "Daniel, darling, breakfast is ready when you are." Sarah's cheerful voice carried up the stairs, accompanied by the mouth-watering smell of bacon and eggs. The reality of having to get dressed hit him then. Last night had been one thing, emergency nightie in the privacy of his room. But breakfast meant going downstairs, sitting across from Sarah, having normal conversation while wearing his cousin's butterfly jeans and lilac sweater. The thought made his stomach flip. But what choice did he have? His own clothes were wrinkled and needed washing, and Rebecca Morrison's wardrobe certainly wasn't an option. "It's just Aunt Sarah," he told himself firmly. "She said it didn't matter. She won't make it weird if I don't make it weird." Getting dressed felt like performing some kind of ritual he didn't understand. Each piece of clothing required conscious thought, the way the feminine underwear sat differently, how to pull the sweater on without messing up his hair, the strange sensation of jeans that hugged rather than hung loose. When he finally made his way downstairs, Daniel felt hyper-aware of every step, every movement. The clothes moved with him differently than he was used to, and he found himself unconsciously adjusting his posture, his gait, in response. Sarah looked up from the stove as he entered the kitchen, her face lighting up with the same warm smile she'd worn yesterday. "Good morning, sweetheart. You look lovely. That colour suits you beautifully. Did you sleep well?" Something in her completely normal tone made Daniel's shoulders relax. She wasn't staring, wasn't making a fuss, wasn't treating him like some kind of spectacle. She was just being Sarah, making breakfast and fussing over him exactly as she always did. "I slept really well, actually. Better than I have in ages. Wonderful. I always say there's nothing like proper cotton for a good night's sleep. All those synthetic fabrics they put in boys' pajamas these days. No wonder young people have trouble resting." She gestured toward the table, where a full English breakfast was waiting. "Sit, eat. We have phone calls to make this morning." As Daniel took his seat, he caught his reflection in the kitchen window and paused. The morning light streaming through the glass showed him a figure that looked different, not just because of the clothes, but something in his posture, his expression. There was a softness there he'd never noticed before, a quiet contentment that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside. "Now then," Sarah said, settling across from him with her own plate and a steaming mug of tea, "I've been thinking about our little situation. I'll ring the bus company as soon as they open, but these things can take time to sort out, especially if this Rebecca girl is from out of town." Daniel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "How much time?" "Hard to say, darling. Could be a day or two. Could be longer if she's travelling or if there are complications with the paperwork." Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were gentle as they studied his face. "I hope you don't mind staying in Kirsty's things for a bit longer. I know it must feel strange." Strange, that was certainly one word for it. But as Daniel sat there in the sun-warmed kitchen, wearing clothes that felt like silk against his skin, he found that strange wasn't necessarily bad. It was just new, different, like looking at the world through a window he'd never noticed before. "It's not as bad as I thought it would be," he admitted quietly. "The clothes, I mean. They're actually quite comfortable." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Of course they are, dear one. Good quality clothes should always be comfortable, regardless of who they were originally made for." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "And you know what? I think this little adventure might be exactly what you need. Sometimes life puts us in unexpected situations so we can discover things about ourselves we never knew were there." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, Sarah's weathered and warm, his own looking somehow different against the lavender cuff of Kirsty's sweater. He thought about how he'd slept, how the soft fabrics had felt against his skin, how his reflection in the window had shown him someone he almost didn't recognize, but somehow wanted to know better. "Maybe," he said softly, and meant it more than he'd expected to. Outside, birds were singing in Sarah's garden, and the morning stretched ahead of them full of unknown possibilities. For the first time since the luggage mix-up, Daniel found himself curious, rather than worried about what those possibilities might hold. Chapter 4. Unexpected comfort. The phone call to the bus company proved as frustrating as Sarah had predicted. After 20 minutes of being transferred between departments, they finally reached someone who could help, or rather, someone who could explain why help would be delayed. "I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Henderson," the woman on the other end said, her voice tinny through the speakerphone. "But Miss Morrison flew back to Barcelona yesterday morning. She left the bag with our London office, but our courier service is backed up due to a strike. It could be 3 to 4 days before we can arrange collection and delivery." Sarah caught Daniel's eye across the kitchen table, her expression sympathetic. "I see. And there's no way to expedite this?" "I'm afraid not. We'll call as soon as we have a delivery slot available. In the meantime, Miss Morrison did leave her contact details if the young man wants to reach out directly." After they hung up, Sarah immediately set about making tea, her movements brisk with the kind of purposeful energy she always channeled into solving problems. "Well then, that settles it. It looks like you'll be staying in Kirsty's things a bit longer than expected." Daniel found himself oddly relieved rather than disappointed. "I suppose there's nothing else to be done. How do you feel about it?" It was such a typical Sarah question, direct but gentle, inviting honesty without demanding it. Daniel wrapped his hands around the warm mug and considered. How did he feel? "It's strange," he said finally, "but not bad strange, just different. Like everything's a little softer around the edges." "Softer? The clothes, yes, but more than that. The way I move, maybe? The way things feel." He struggled to find the right words. "It's hard to explain." Sarah's smile was knowing and warm. "You don't have to explain everything, sweetheart. Sometimes it's enough just to notice what we notice." They spent the morning in gentle companionship, Sarah tending to her roses while Daniel helped by carrying her gardening tools and holding the basket for cuttings. The butterfly jeans proved surprisingly practical for outdoor work, the stretch fabric moving with him as he crouched and stretched. More than once, he caught himself noticing how the soft sweater felt against his skin when he moved, or how the morning breeze seemed to touch him differently. "You're very thoughtful today," Sarah observed as they came in for lunch, both of them slightly dusty and thoroughly content. "Penny for your thoughts?" Daniel helped her arrange the fresh roses in a vase, watching how she angled each stem just so. "I keep expecting to feel more, I don't know, embarrassed, uncomfortable, but I don't. If anything, I feel more relaxed than I have in ages. And why do you think that might be?" He considered this as they prepared simple sandwiches together, moving around the kitchen in an easy rhythm. Sarah had this gift for asking questions that made him think, without making him feel pressured to come up with the right answer. "Maybe because there's no one to perform for?" he said eventually. "At home, at school, I always feel like I have to be a certain way. Like there's a Daniel I'm supposed to be and I'm not sure I'm doing it right. And here I can just be, even dressed like this, especially dressed like this maybe. Because it's so far from what anyone expects that I don't have to worry about meeting expectations at all." Sarah paused in her sandwich making to look at him directly, her eyes bright with understanding. "Oh, my dear boy, you've hit on something quite profound there." That afternoon, as they settled in the sitting room with books and tea, Daniel found himself studying his reflection in the window glass. The person looking back at him seemed calmer than usual, more at peace. The lilac sweater had stretched slightly over the course of the day, becoming even softer and more comfortable, and he'd stopped noticing the butterfly embroidery on the jeans entirely. "Sarah," he said quietly, not looking away from the window, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, darling. Anything at all. Have you ever felt like the person everyone thinks you are isn't quite the person you actually are inside?" The silence stretched between them, gentle and thoughtful. When Sarah spoke, her voice was soft with memory and understanding. "Oh, my sweet boy. More often than you might think." She set down her book, giving him her full attention. "I spent years trying to be the wife everyone expected. Quiet, domestic, never questioning anything. It took me far too long to realize that being authentic wasn't selfish. It was necessary. But what if being authentic means being something people don't expect? Something that might disappoint them? Then those people don't love the real you, do they? They love their idea of you." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "The people who truly matter will love you for exactly who you are, not who they think you should be." Daniel finally turned away from the window to look at her directly. "Even if who I am is complicated? Especially then, darling. The most interesting people always are." They sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light shifted and changed around them. Daniel felt something settling in his chest, a kind of permission he hadn't realized he'd been seeking, to be curious about himself, to notice things without having to immediately judge or categorize them, to simply exist in this strange, soft space between expectations. "I think I wouldn't mind staying in these clothes tomorrow too," he said quietly, "if that's all right." "Of course it's all right. They're just clothes, after all." But Sarah's smile suggested she understood it was about much more than fabric and thread. though we might want to do a bit of washing tomorrow. Can't have you wearing the same things every day. Washing? Don't worry, dear one. Kirsty left plenty of options. We'll find you something lovely for tomorrow. The thought of exploring more of Kirsty's wardrobe should have terrified him. Instead, Daniel felt a flutter of something that might have been anticipation. What other soft, beautiful things might be waiting to be discovered? What other ways might he find to feel this strange, peaceful sense of rightness within himself? As evening approached and they prepared dinner together, Daniel caught himself humming, something he rarely did at home. The sound seemed to come from some deeper, more relaxed part of himself, and Sarah smiled when she heard it. You seem happy, sweetheart. I am, Daniel realized with some surprise. I really am. Good. Happiness suits you even better than lilac does. Later, as they said goodnight at the bottom of the stairs, Sarah pulled him into one of her encompassing hugs. Sweet dreams, my dear one. And remember, there's no rush to figure anything out. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're not trying to make them at all. In his borrowed nightgown, surrounded by the familiar scents of lavender and contentment, Daniel fell asleep more easily than he had in months. And if his dreams were filled with soft fabrics and gentle possibilities, with images of himself moving through the world with a grace he'd never known he possessed, well, those were dreams he found himself hoping might somehow find their way into his waking hours too. Chapter 5. The awakening the second morning at Sarah's cottage dawned soft and golden, with dewdrops catching the early light like scattered diamonds across the garden. Daniel woke naturally, without the jarring intrusion of his alarm, and lay still for a moment in the gentle embrace of Egyptian cotton sheets and the flowing nightgown that had become as familiar as his own skin. 2 days. 2 days of living in this strange, peaceful limbo where he could simply exist without explanation or apology. Days of discovering that comfort came in the most unexpected forms, in the whisper of silk against his legs, in the way a fitted sweater made him stand a little straighter, in the curious lightness he felt when catching glimpses of himself in mirrors and windows. Today, Sarah had suggested they spend the morning in her art studio, a converted conservatory where she painted watercolour landscapes and portraits of her beloved roses. The idea filled Daniel with quiet anticipation. There was something about the way Sarah looked at the world, the way she saw beauty in unexpected places, that made him feel understood in ways he couldn't quite articulate. He chose his clothes more carefully now, no longer with the desperate urgency of that first day, but with something approaching pleasure. A soft cream sweater with delicate pearl buttons, a pair of Kirsty's favourite jeans in pale blue denim that had been worn to perfect softness. Dressing had become a kind of meditation, each piece of clothing a small choice toward becoming more himself. "Good morning, beautiful soul," Sarah called from the kitchen as he came downstairs. It was a greeting she'd used since he was small, but somehow it felt different now, more seen, more true. "Good morning," Daniel replied, accepting the cup of tea she pressed into his hands. Steam rose between them, carrying the scent of bergamot and possibilities. "I thought we might paint this morning if you'd like. I have a new set of watercolours that are simply begging to be used. I'd love that, though I'm not sure I'll be any good at it." "Goodness, darling. Since when has being good at something been a requirement for joy?" Sarah's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Besides, I have a feeling you might surprise yourself." The conservatory was a temple of light and growing things, with Sarah's easel set up near the windows that looked out over her prize roses. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the walls, each one capturing some moment of natural beauty, with Sarah's characteristic warmth and gentle eye. "Now then," Sarah said, settling Daniel at a smaller easel she'd brought in specially for him. "What calls to you? What would you like to paint?" Daniel looked around, taking in the riot of colour and life that surrounded them. Through the glass, he could see butterflies dancing among the flowers, real ones that echoed the embroidered creatures on those jeans. Something about their graceful movement, their apparent freedom, drew his attention. The butterflies, maybe? They're so fluid, so themselves. Perfect choice. Sarah squeezed his shoulder gently. "They're rather like you, actually. Like me? Beautiful creatures in a process of becoming." For a while, they painted in comfortable silence, the only sounds the soft whisper of brushes against paper and the distant hum of bees in the garden. Daniel found himself absorbed in the work in a way that surprised him. The watercolours seemed to flow from his brush with their own intelligence, creating shapes and movements that felt more right than anything he'd produced in his mandatory art classes at school. "Daniel," Sarah said eventually, her voice gentle but somehow significant. "Can I tell you something?" He looked up from his painting, a butterfly caught mid-flight, its wings a delicate blend of blues and purples that seemed to shimmer on the paper. "Of course. I've been watching you these past days, and I've seen something beautiful happening. You've been blooming, if I may say so, like one of my roses opening to the sun." Heat rose in Daniel's cheeks, but it wasn't the burning embarrassment he might have expected. It was something warmer, more complex. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do, sweetheart. At least partly." Sarah set down her brush and turned to face him fully. "There's a lightness in you that wasn't there before. A kind of rightness. As if you're finally breathing freely after holding your breath for a very long time." Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he touched his brush to the water jar, watching the colours swirl and blend. "It's just the clothes," he said quietly. "Being somewhere no one knows me. Being able to relax." "Is it just the clothes, darling?" The question hung in the air between them, gentle but persistent. Daniel felt something cracking open in his chest, not breaking, but opening, like a flower unfurling its petals to the light. I don't know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes when I catch sight of myself in the mirror, I think I see someone I recognize. Someone I've always known was there, but never knew how to find. And how does that feel? Scary and wonderful. Like coming home to a house I didn't know I'd been missing." Sarah moved her chair closer, close enough that he could smell her familiar floral scent, could see the gentle understanding in her eyes. "Can you tell me more about this person you see in the mirror?" Daniel set down his brush with hands that shook, just slightly. This was territory he'd never explored with words, feelings he'd kept locked so deep inside himself that he'd almost forgotten they existed. She's softer than I am, more graceful. When she moves, it's like dancing, even when she's just making tea or arranging flowers." The words tumbled out now, as if a dam had burst inside him. "She laughs more easily. She's not afraid of being beautiful, or gentle, or needing to be cared for sometimes." "She?" Sarah's voice was carefully neutral, but Daniel caught the flicker of understanding in her expression. Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "I don't know why I said that. I don't know what's wrong with me." "Oh, my darling boy, darling child, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you." Sarah reached for his hands, holding them gently in her weathered ones. "Nothing at all. You're simply discovering parts of yourself that have always been there, waiting for a safe place to emerge. But I'm supposed to be Daniel. I'm supposed to be a boy who likes boy things and wants to grow up to be a man like Dad." "Says who?" Sarah's voice was soft, but fierce. "Who decided what you're supposed to be? And more importantly, why should their opinion matter more than what's in your heart?" The tears came then. Not harsh or bitter, but like rain after a long drought, cleansing and necessary, and somehow healing. "I've felt this way for so long," Daniel whispered. "Since I was little, I used to watch other girls and wonder what it would feel like to be them, to move through the world the way they did. But I knew it was wrong, knew I couldn't tell anyone." "It's not wrong, sweetheart. It's not wrong at all. How can you be sure? Because I see you. I see how peaceful you are when you're allowed to be yourself, how your whole spirit seems to relax and unfurl." Sarah's thumbs brushed gently across his knuckles. "I see how you touch the fabric of those clothes like you're greeting old friends, how you stand a little taller, breathe a little deeper, smile a little more easily. But what if this isn't just playing dress up? What if this is who I really am inside? Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Sarah's voice was steady as bedrock, warm as sunshine. There's no rush, no pressure, just truth and love, and the safety to explore what that truth might mean. They sat in silence for a long moment, Daniel's tears gradually subsiding as something deeper settled in his chest, a sense of being truly seen for the first time in his life. Outside, the butterflies continued their eternal dance among the roses, and his half-finished painting seemed to shimmer with new meaning. "Sarah?" he said finally. "Yes, darling. If I wanted to try a different name, just to see how it felt, would that be all right?" Sarah's smile was radiant. "Of course it would be. What name calls to you?" "Danielle," he said, the word feeling like silk on his tongue. "I've always liked the name Danielle. It means God is my judge, which seems fitting somehow. Like only the universe gets to decide who I really am, not other people." "Danielle." Sarah tested the name, her voice wrapping around it like a blessing. "It's beautiful, strong and feminine and perfect for you. You really think so? I think it suits the person I see when you're truly relaxed and happy. The person who's been waiting so patiently for permission to exist. Danielle felt something shift inside her, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. The name felt like coming home, like stepping into a dress that had been tailored specifically for her soul. Will you call me that? When we're alone, I mean. I don't know about around other people yet, but here, with you, I would be honored to call you Danielle. Sarah pulled her into a hug that seemed to encompass years of hidden longing and the promise of acceptance. My beautiful Danielle. As they held each other in the golden light of the conservatory, surrounded by half-finished paintings, Danielle felt something she'd never experienced before. The profound peace of being completely, authentically herself and being loved for exactly who that person was. What happens now? She whispered into Sarah's shoulder. Now we take it one moment at a time. We paint butterflies and drink tea and talk about what it means to be true to yourself in a world that sometimes forgets how many different ways there are to be beautiful. And Kirsty? When she comes back? Oh, my darling girl. I think you'll find Kirsty more understanding than you might expect. She's always had a gift for seeing people's hearts. Sarah pulled back to look into Danielle's eyes. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, it's enough that you know who you are, and that I know, and that you're safe and loved and free to explore what that means. Danielle looked down at her butterfly painting, seeing it now as something prophetic, a creature in the act of becoming, wings spread wide to catch the light. She picked up her brush again, adding delicate touches of gold to the wings, making them shimmer with life and possibility. Thank you, she whispered. For what, sweetheart? For seeing me, for not being afraid of who I might be. Oh, my beautiful Danielle, thank you for trusting me enough to let me see the real you. It's the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. Outside, the butterflies continued their ancient dance, and in the warm light of the conservatory, surrounded by love and acceptance and the sweet scent of roses, Danielle began to paint her true self into existence, one delicate brushstroke at a time. Chapter 6. Kirsty's arrival the next 2 days passed in a gentle haze of contentment that Danielle had never imagined possible. Each morning brought new small discoveries, how her reflection in the bathroom mirror no longer startled her, but instead offered a shy smile of recognition, how she'd begun to move differently without conscious thought, her gestures softer and more natural. Sarah had quietly adjusted to calling her Danielle when they were alone, the name falling from her lips as naturally as breathing. They'd spent hours in comfortable conversation, Sarah sharing stories from her own journey of self-discovery after her divorce, how she'd learned to prioritize authenticity over others' expectations. In return, Danielle found herself opening up about years of quiet confusion, of feeling like she was playing a role that never quite fit properly. It's like I've been wearing shoes that were almost the right size, she'd explained yesterday afternoon as they worked together in the garden, her hands gentle with Sarah's prize roses, close enough that I could walk in them, but they pinched just enough to make every step uncomfortable. Now, wearing one of Kirsty's flowing sundresses in soft yellow cotton, Danielle felt more herself than ever before. The dress moved with her as she helped Sarah prepare lunch, its fabric catching the breeze through the open kitchen window. Her hair, grown longer than most boys wore it, had started to show gentle waves when she brushed it differently, and Sarah had shown her how to tuck it behind her ears in a way that framed her face beautifully. They were discussing plans for the afternoon, perhaps a walk to the village shops, where Sarah insisted no one would think twice about her niece visiting for the week, when the sound of a car in the drive made them both freeze. That's odd, Sarah murmured, moving to the window. I'm not expecting anyone. Danielle felt her stomach drop as a familiar blue hatchback came into view. Is that Kirsty's car? Sarah's voice was carefully calm, but Danielle caught the flicker of concern in her expression. She wasn't supposed to be back from university until next week. Panic seized Danielle's chest like a cold fist. This was it, the end of her brief, beautiful experiment in authenticity. Kirsty would see her in the yellow sundress, would demand explanations, would think she was some kind of freak or pervert. The safe haven Sarah had created would crumble, and she'd be left exposed and ashamed. I need to change, she said frantically, already moving toward the stairs. I need to, Danielle. Sarah's voice stopped her at the kitchen door. Breathe, sweetheart. It's going to be all right. You don't understand. She'll think I'm disgusting. The front door opened with its familiar creak, and Kirsty's cheerful voice rang through the cottage. Mum, I'm home. I brought my laundry and an enormous appetite for your cooking. Danielle pressed herself against the kitchen doorframe, heart hammering so hard she was sure it must be audible. Through the archway, she could see Kirsty dropping bags in the hallway, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a university sweatshirt that had seen better days. In the kitchen, darling, Sarah called back, moving to stand protectively near Danielle. We have a lovely surprise. We? Kirsty's footsteps approached, and Danielle felt like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and exposed. Did Daniel arrive early? I thought he wasn't coming until... Kirsty appeared in the kitchen doorway and stopped dead, her bright smile faltering into confusion as she took in the scene before her. Her gaze moved from Sarah's carefully neutral expression to Danielle, standing frozen in the yellow sundress, and back again. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, filled with all the weight of explanation and understanding that hadn't yet found words. Danielle felt heat rise in her cheeks, shame and terror warring in her chest as she waited for judgment, for rejection, for the careful acceptance she'd found to crumble into pieces. Oh, Kirsty said softly. Then, after another moment of careful observation, oh my. Kirsty, darling, let me explain, Sarah began, but her daughter held up a gentle hand. No, Mum, let me. Kirsty's voice was thoughtful, her eyes never leaving Danielle's face. You're Daniel, but also not Daniel, not right now. Danielle nodded mutely, unable to find her voice. And you're wearing my yellow sundress, which looks absolutely lovely on you, by the way. It suits your colouring much better than it ever did mine. I'm sorry, Danielle whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know how this looks. I know how weird this must be. There was a luggage mix-up and I didn't have any clothes and your mum said I could borrow something and then I couldn't stop. I know it's wrong, I know it's strange, but hey. Kirsty stepped closer, her expression gentle. Slow down. You're hyperventilating. Sarah moved to Danielle's other side, her presence warm and steadying. Breathe with me, sweetheart. In and out. There's no judgment here. Gradually, Danielle's breathing slowed, though her heart continued to race. Kirsty studied her with the same careful attention Sarah always showed, and Danielle found herself wondering what she saw, what conclusions she was drawing about her strange cousin in borrowed clothes. What name do you prefer? Kirsty asked finally. When you're like this? The question was so matter-of-fact, so free of condemnation, that Danielle felt tears spring to her eyes. Danielle. I like Danielle. Danielle. Kirsty tested the name with the same careful consideration Sarah had shown. It's beautiful. It suits you. You're not disgusted or angry that I'm wearing your clothes? Kirsty's laugh was warm and genuine. Disgusted? Danielle, you look happier than I've ever seen Daniel look. And as for my clothes... She gestured at the sundress with obvious approval. That dress has been hanging in my wardrobe for months because the colour washes me out completely. I'm delighted someone can finally do it justice. Danielle stared at her cousin in amazement. You're really not upset? Why would I be upset that someone I care about has found a way to be comfortable in their own skin? Kirsty moved to the kettle, filling it with the automatic efficiency of someone thoroughly at home. Though I have to say, I'm deeply impressed with your fashion sense. Aunt Sarah helped, Danielle said quietly. Of course she did. Mum's always had an eye for what brings out people's best selves. Kirsty began assembling tea things, her movements easy and natural. So tell me, is this new, this feeling? Or have you been carrying it around for a while? There was something about Kirsty's straightforward approach that made honesty feel safer than deflection. A long while. Since I was little, really. I never knew what to do about it. Never had anywhere safe to explore it. Until now. Kirsty nodded thoughtfully. And how are you feeling about it all? The exploring, I mean. Danielle looked down at the yellow sundress, at her arms and hands that somehow seemed more graceful emerging from its short sleeves. Like I'm finally breathing properly. Like I've been holding my breath for years and just now realised I could let it out. That sounds wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. It really is. They settled around the kitchen table with fresh tea and the remnants of lunch, an easy triangle of understanding that felt both new and ancient. Kirsty peppered Danielle with gentle questions, not invasive or demanding, but genuinely curious about her experience, her feelings, what she'd discovered about herself over the past few days. The strangest thing, Danielle found herself explaining, is how natural it feels. I keep expecting it to feel like playing dress-up, like pretending to be someone else. But instead it feels like coming home to myself. That doesn't sound strange at all. Kirsty said firmly. That sounds like truth recognizing itself. As the afternoon wore on, Danielle felt her panic gradually transform into something approaching wonder. Not only was Kirsty not disgusted or alarmed, she seemed genuinely delighted to meet this version of her cousin. She shared stories from university, talked about friends who were exploring their own identities in various ways, normalized the idea that people were complex and multifaceted and deserving of love regardless of how they chose to express themselves. You know what this calls for? Kirsty announced as they finished their tea. A proper fashion consultation. I've been dying to have someone to go shopping with who actually appreciates my taste in clothes. Shopping? Danielle's eyes widened with a mixture of excitement and terror. Oh yes. If you're going to be borrowing my wardrobe, we need to make sure you have things that actually fit properly. You're taller than me, and those jeans are getting a bit short in the leg. What if someone sees? What if someone sees a lovely girl out shopping with her cousin and her aunt? What's unusual about that? Kirsty's grin was infectious. Besides, we'll go to the shops in Cambridge. No one knows us there. Sarah, who had been quietly observing this exchange with obvious delight, cleared her throat. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. Danielle deserves to have some things that are properly hers, chosen specifically for her. The word hers sent a warm flutter through Danielle's chest. Things that were hers. Clothes chosen not out of desperation or necessity, but because they reflected who she was becoming, who she was discovering herself to be. Really? She whispered. You'd both come with me? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Kirsty declared. I've been waiting my whole life for a sister to go shopping with. Sister? Well, that's what you are, isn't it? When you're being Danielle, I mean. My sister. The simple acceptance in those words hit Danielle like a physical force. Sister. Not cousin, not boy in disguise, not something shameful to be hidden or explained away. Sister. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd really like that. Then it settled. Kirsty clapped her hands together with obvious delight. Tomorrow we'll have a proper girls' day out. Shopping, lunch, maybe a bit of pampering. What do you say? Danielle looked between Sarah and Kirsty, this family who had welcomed not just Daniel but Danielle, who had made space for all the complicated, contradictory parts of who she was becoming, and felt her heart swell with gratitude so intense it almost hurt. I say yes, she whispered, to all of it. As evening fell, and they settled into the comfortable rhythms of family dinner, Danielle marvelled at how quickly the strange had become familiar, how easily Kirsty had slipped into calling her by her chosen name, how natural it felt to be planning a future that included both sides of herself. Thank you, she said quietly, as they cleared the dishes together, for not making this weird or difficult, for just accepting it. Kirsty bumped her shoulder gently. Family accepts family, Danielle. All of family, including the parts that take a while to show themselves. Even the complicated parts, especially the complicated parts. Those are usually the most interesting. Later, as Danielle prepared for bed in one of Kirsty's nightgowns, while Kirsty unpacked in her own room, she could hear her aunt and cousin chatting through the thin wall, easy conversation about university, about plans for their shopping expedition, about how much Kirsty had missed being home. For the first time since this strange adventure began, Danielle felt truly hopeful about the future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to be brave, new chances to discover what it meant to live authentically in a world that didn't always make space for people like her. But tonight, surrounded by love and acceptance and the promise of sisters who would stand by her side, Danielle fell asleep smiling, her dreams full of yellow sundresses and shared laughter and the endless possibility of becoming exactly who she was meant to be. Chapter 7. Shopping and sisterhood. The morning of their shopping expedition dawned bright and clear, with the kind of golden sunshine that seemed to promise good things ahead. Danielle woke with butterflies dancing in her stomach. Not the anxious kind she'd grown accustomed to, but the excited flutter of anticipation, mixed with just enough nervousness to make everything feel alive and important. She'd chosen her outfit the night before with Kirsty's help, a soft pink blouse with tiny pearl buttons and a pair of dark jeans that actually fit her properly in the length. Kirsty had also lent her a delicate silver necklace and matching earrings clip-ons that felt like the most precious jewellery she'd ever worn. Ready for your first proper shopping adventure? Kirsty asked as they gathered in the kitchen for breakfast, her eyes bright with excitement that matched Danielle's own. I think so, Danielle replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. What if I don't know what to choose? What if nothing looks right? "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah said warmly, setting a plate of fresh scones in front of them. "Choosing clothes isn't about knowing some secret formula. It's about finding pieces that make you feel like the most authentic version of yourself. Besides," Kirsty added with a grin, "that's what sisters are for. I have an excellent eye for what will suit you." The word sister still sent a warm thrill through Danielle's chest. She was beginning to believe it might actually be true, that she could be someone's sister, that she could belong in that easy, natural way families were supposed to work. The drive to Cambridge was filled with comfortable chatter, Kirsty pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about her university friends while Sarah navigated the increasingly busy roads. Danielle found herself relaxing into the passenger seat, watching the countryside give way to suburban streets, and finally to the bustling energy of the town centre. Right then, Kirsty announced as they parked near the shopping centre, "First stop is definitely going to be the department store. They have the best selection, and the fitting rooms are lovely and private." Walking through the automatic doors felt like stepping into an entirely new world. Danielle had been in department stores before, of course, but always trailing behind her parents toward the men's section, trying to summon enthusiasm for clothes that felt like costumes for a role she didn't want to play. Now surrounded by flowing fabrics and soft colours and the gentle hum of women's voices discussing styles and sizes, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Where shall we start?" Sarah asked, linking arms with both girls in a gesture that made Danielle feel cherished and protected. "Casual wear, I think," Kirsty decided. "Basics that can be mixed and matched. Then we can move on to something more fun." The next 2 hours passed in a wonderful whirlwind of discovery. Kirsty proved to be an excellent shopping companion, pulling items from racks with a practiced eye while offering gentle commentary on colours and cuts. She seemed to instinctively understand what would work for Danielle's taller frame, her colouring, her still emerging sense of personal style. "Try this," she said, holding up a sweater in soft lavender wool. "It'll bring out your eyes beautifully. And this skirt, it's a classic A-line. Very flattering and versatile," Sarah added, selecting a piece in charcoal grey that looked both elegant and comfortable. "Oh, and this cardigan in rose pink, it would be perfect for layering," Kirsty continued, her arms growing full of carefully chosen pieces. "And these trousers in navy, they're so comfortable and smart-looking." They moved through the racks methodically but joyfully, building a collection that felt both practical and beautiful. A white blouse that could be dressed up or down, a soft knit dress in dusty blue that draped beautifully, a pair of dark jeans that actually fit Danielle's longer legs properly. Each selection was made with care and consideration, with gentle discussions about versatility and personal taste. Now, Kirsty said quietly, as they approached a more intimate section of the store, "We should probably think about, well, proper undergarments. What you've been borrowing from me isn't really the right size, is it?" Danielle felt her cheeks warm, but Kirsty's matter-of-fact tone helped ease the embarrassment. No, not really, but I wouldn't know where to start." "That's what we're here for," Sarah said gently, guiding them toward the lingerie department. "Every woman needs properly fitted foundations. It makes all the difference in how clothes feel and look." The selection was overwhelming, delicate lace, smooth cotton, soft silk in every shade imaginable. Danielle stood uncertainly among the displays, feeling both drawn to the beautiful options and terrified of making the wrong choice. "Start with basics," Kirsty advised, sensing her overwhelm. "Comfortable, well-made pieces in neutral colours. You can always add prettier things later." With gentle guidance from both women, Danielle found herself selecting a few carefully chosen pieces, soft cotton bras in white and nude, matching briefs that felt impossibly delicate against her fingers, and a few camis for layering. Each selection felt deeply personal, a private acknowledgement of who she was becoming. "These will be perfect under your new clothes," Sarah said approvingly as they added the intimate items to their growing collection. Comfort is always the most important thing. The fitting room felt like a private sanctuary where Danielle could experiment without judgment. Each new outfit was a small revelation. The way the sweater draped over her frame, how the skirt moved when she walked, the confidence she felt when all the pieces came together in harmony. "How do you feel?" Kirsty called through the fitting room door as Danielle tried on a particularly lovely combination, a cream-coloured blouse tucked into a navy skirt with a subtle floral pattern. "I feel..." Danielle paused, studying herself in the mirror. The person looking back at her was unmistakably herself, but somehow more complete than she'd ever appeared before. "I feel beautiful." Is that silly? It's not silly at all, darling. Sarah's voice was warm with emotion. You are beautiful, inside and out. When Danielle emerged from the fitting room, both Sarah and Kirsty fell silent for a moment. The outfit was perfect, sophisticated but youthful, flattering without being fussy, exactly the kind of thing a confident young woman might choose for a day out with friends. Oh my, Sarah whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Look at you! That's the one, Kirsty said decisively. That's definitely going in the eyes pile. Danielle experimented with each carefully chosen piece. The white blouse could be crisp and professional, or soft and romantic depending on how she styled it. The dusty blue knit dress moved like water when she walked. The navy trousers made her feel confident and put together in a way she'd never experienced before. How does the lavender sweater feel? Kirsty called through the fitting room door. Like it was made for me, Danielle replied, marveling at how the soft wool seemed to transform her entire silhouette. The proper undergarments made everything fit so much better, giving her a shape that felt both natural and wonderfully feminine. They continued building her wardrobe with growing excitement. A few more blouses, one in cream silk that felt like luxury against her skin, another in soft pink cotton with tiny buttons, the charcoal skirt that could work for any occasion, a second cardigan in sage green that brought out the flecks of colour in her eyes. Each piece was chosen not just for how it looked, but for how it made Danielle feel, comfortable, authentic, genuinely herself. Now for something special, Kirsty announced as they finished with the basics. Something just for fun, something that makes you feel absolutely wonderful. They wandered towards more dresses, where Danielle found herself overwhelmed by the choices. Florals and solids, flowing and fitted, casual and formal. It was like looking at a rainbow of possibilities. What draws your eye? Sarah asked gently. Don't think about practicality, or what you think you should choose. What makes your heart skip a beat? Danielle's gaze was drawn to a dress in deep emerald green, its fabric catching the light like water. It had a fitted bodice and a skirt that would fall just past her knees, with delicate lace details at the neckline that managed to be feminine without being overwhelming. That one, she said softly, pointing. It's probably too fancy, but it's perfect, Kirsty interrupted, already reaching for it. And it's not too fancy at all, it's exactly fancy enough. In the fitting room, the dress transformed Danielle completely. The colour brought out the warmth in her skin and made her hair seem to glow, while the cut emphasised the graceful lines she was only beginning to recognise in her own reflection. When she stepped out to show Sarah and Kirsty, she felt like she was floating. Oh, Danielle, Sarah breathed, her hand pressed to her heart. You look absolutely radiant. That dress was made for you, Kirsty agreed, circling her with an appraising eye. It's like it was waiting on that rack specifically for you to find it. Standing there in the emerald dress, surrounded by the love and approval of her newfound sisters, Danielle felt something she'd never experienced before. The joy of being seen and celebrated for exactly who she was. Not who she was supposed to be, not who others expected her to be, but who she truly was in her heart. Can we really get all of this? She asked quietly, looking at the growing pile of carefully chosen clothes. Of course we can, Sarah said firmly. This is an investment in your happiness, sweetheart, and happiness is always worth investing in. After they'd made their purchases, Sarah insisting on paying despite Danielle's protests, they found a lovely cafe for lunch. Sitting at a small table by the window, surrounded by shopping bags and the gentle buzz of other women enjoying their day out, Danielle felt a profound sense of belonging. Thank you, she said quietly as they waited for their food to arrive. Both of you, for making this so wonderful, so normal, for not making me feel like I'm asking for too much. You're not asking for too much, darling. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her hand. You're asking for the right to be yourself. That's the most basic thing any of us deserve. Besides, Kirsty added with a grin, I've been waiting my whole life for a sister to go shopping with. You're doing me the favour here. Really? Really? Growing up as an only child, I always imagined having a sister to share clothes with, to share fashion advice, to have those lovely bonding moments with. Kirsty's expression grew soft and sincere. Finding out I had one all along, just waiting for the right moment to emerge, it feels like a gift. Danielle felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind that came from being overwhelmed by love and acceptance. I always wanted a sister too. I just never imagined that it could be this easy, Sarah suggested gently. That love could be this simple and unconditional? Exactly. Well, now you know, Kirsty said, raising her teacup in a mock toast. To sisterhood. and shopping, and the courage to be exactly who we're meant to be. To family, Sarah added, lifting her own cup, in all its beautiful, complex, surprising forms. To being home, Danielle whispered, completing their impromptu ceremony. As they walked back to the car later that afternoon, loaded down with packages and glowing with the satisfaction of a day well spent, Danielle caught sight of their reflection in a shop window. 3 women, clearly related, obviously fond of each other, sharing the kind of easy intimacy that spoke of deep bonds and unconditional love. For the first time in her life, she looked like she belonged in her own story. "What are you thinking about?" Kirsty asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "Just this. All of it." Danielle gestured at their reflection, at the bags full of beautiful clothes chosen specifically for her, at the easy way they moved together like they'd been sisters their entire lives. "A week ago, I didn't even know this was possible. And now? Now you know that there are as many ways to be a family as there are people in the world," Sarah finished softly, "and that the best families are the ones that make room for all of who we are, not just the parts that are easy to understand." As they drove home through the golden afternoon light, Danielle felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness, of possibility, of a future that could hold all the different facets of who she was becoming. The emerald dress hung carefully in the back of the car, a tangible reminder that beautiful transformations were not only possible, but worthy of celebration. "Same time next month?" Kirsty asked as they pulled into Sarah's drive. Really, a sister's wardrobe is never truly complete. There's always room for something new and wonderful." Danielle smiled, thinking of all the tomorrows stretching ahead of them, full of laughter and shared secrets and the kind of love that asked nothing more than the courage to be true. I'd like that very much." As they carried their packages into the cottage, chattering about their successful day and making plans for a fashion show after dinner, Danielle realized that she was no longer just discovering who she might be. She was actively becoming who she was meant to be. Chapter 8. Living authentically, the days following their shopping expedition settled into a rhythm that felt both precious and natural, like finding a song that perfectly matched the beat of one's heart. Danielle woke each morning with a sense of quiet anticipation, no longer surprised by her reflection in the mirror, but greeting it with the gentle recognition one might show an old friend finally come home. Her new clothes hung in what had become her section of Kirsty's wardrobe, the emerald dress taking pride of place beside the lavender sweater and navy skirt, the cream silk blouse folded with reverent care. Each morning brought the simple joy of choice. Would today call for the dusty blue knit dress that moved like water when she walked? Or perhaps the rose-pink cardigan over dark jeans for working in Sarah's garden? "You're humming again," Sarah observed one morning as they prepared breakfast together, Danielle wearing the sage green cardigan that brought out her eyes and a flowing cream skirt that felt like wearing a cloud. "Am I?" Danielle paused in her task of arranging fresh flowers, Sarah's roses mixed with sprigs of lavender from the herb garden. "I hadn't noticed. You do it when you're really content. It's lovely." Sarah smiled as she flipped pancakes with practiced efficiency. "What song is it today?" Danielle listened to the melody she'd been unconsciously creating, something soft and lilting that seemed to rise from somewhere deep in her chest. "I don't know. Something new, I think. Something that didn't exist before this week. The song of someone becoming themselves," Sarah suggested as she entered the kitchen, already dressed for the day in one of her flowing cardigans and comfortable skirts. There's nothing more beautiful than that music. These quiet domestic moments had become the heart of Danielle's days. She discovered she had a natural affinity for the gentle rhythms of Sarah's household, the way morning light needed to be welcomed with open curtains and fresh flowers, how afternoon tea was as much about the ritual as the refreshment, the satisfaction of creating beauty in small, everyday ways. "I've never enjoyed cooking before," she confessed that afternoon, as she helped Sarah prepare an elaborate dinner, her hands steady as she chopped vegetables with newfound precision. "At home, it always felt like a chore. But here it feels like love made tangible," Sarah finished, understanding as always. "That's because you're not performing the role of someone else's son anymore. You're simply being yourself, and everything flows more naturally from that authentic place." Danielle paused in her chopping to consider this. It was true. Every action felt more graceful now, more intentional. The way she moved through the kitchen, the care she took with small details, even her posture as she sat reading in the afternoons. It was as if her body had finally received permission to move the way it had always wanted to. "Is this how it's supposed to feel?" she asked quietly. "This rightness?" "Oh, my darling girl, yes, this is exactly how it's supposed to feel." The afternoons had become sacred time for conversation and quiet activities. Sometimes they would work together in Sarah's art studio, Danielle's butterfly painting now framed and hanging beside Sarah's roses. Her artistic skills seemed to be blossoming along with everything else, colours flowing more intuitively from her brush, her eye for composition growing more confident with each session. "You see things differently now," Sarah observed one day as Danielle worked on a delicate watercolour of the garden, capturing not just the visual beauty but something deeper, the feeling of peace that permeated this special place. "Your art has more emotion in it, more soul." "Maybe because I'm not hiding anymore," Danielle replied, adding a touch of gold to represent the afternoon sunlight. "When you're pretending to be someone else, everything you create feels like it belongs to that other person too." Other afternoons, she and Kirsty would curl up together in the sitting room, Kirsty sharing stories from university while teaching Danielle to knit or helping her practice different ways of styling her growing out hair. These sisterly moments felt like treasures, intimate and easy in a way Danielle had never imagined possible. "Tell me about your friends at university," Danielle said one day, as Kirsty showed her how to create a simple braid. "Do any of them understand what this is like?" "More than you might think. My roommate Emma is transgender. She transitioned during our first year. And there's a whole group of us who've become family for each other, people exploring different aspects of identity and sexuality and just what it means to be human." Kirsty's hands were gentle as she worked with Danielle's hair. "You wouldn't be alone there if you ever wanted to visit. You'd be welcomed and celebrated." The idea of a wider community, of other people who might understand this journey, sent a warm flutter through Danielle's chest. Really? Really? There's a whole world out there of people who've discovered that the boxes society tries to put us in are far too small for the complexity of actual human experience. That sounds wonderful and terrifying. The best things usually are. Evenings brought their own gentle rituals. After dinner, they would sometimes walk through Sarah's garden as the sun set, Danielle wearing one of her flowing skirts and enjoying how it moved in the evening breeze. The garden felt different at this hour, more magical, more alive with possibility. "I used to think gardens were just about the flowers," Danielle said one evening as they paused beside Sarah's prized rosebush, its blooms releasing their fragrance into the cooling air. "But it's really about creating a space where beautiful things can flourish, isn't it?" "Exactly, darling. Gardens, families, communities, they all work the same way. You create the right conditions, you tend with care, and you make room for whatever wants to grow." The metaphor felt profound as Danielle considered it. This cottage, this family, had become her garden, a place where the tender, hidden parts of herself could finally unfurl in safety. Some evenings found them in the sitting room, with books and tea, comfortable in shared silence, broken only by the turning of pages or soft requests to pass the biscuits. Danielle had discovered a love for poetry during these quiet hours, drawn to writers who explored themes of identity and transformation. "Listen to this," she said one evening, reading aloud from a collection Kirsty had recommended. "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage." "Rilke," Sarah said softly. "One of my favourites. Rather fitting for your situation, don't you think? The dragon of pretending to be someone else, transformed into the princess of authentic self." Danielle considered this. "I like that. It makes this feel less like running away from who I was, and more like rescuing who I was always meant to be." "That's beautiful, Danielle, and very wise. But perhaps the most precious moments were the quiet ones. Sitting by her bedroom window in the early morning, watching the garden wake up while wearing her soft lavender nightgown, helping with the washing up after meals, her hands graceful in their tasks, feeling completely present and peaceful. Reading in the afternoon sun, a flowing skirt spread around her like water, lost in stories of other people finding their way home to themselves. "You're glowing," Kirsty observed one afternoon, as Danielle sat curled in the window seat, sunlight streaming through her hair, literally glowing. "Like you're lit from within." "I feel lit from within," Danielle replied, not looking up from her book but smiling at the accuracy of the description. Like someone finally turned on all the lights in a house that had been sitting in darkness. That's what authenticity does. It illuminates everything. The most challenging moments came when Danielle found herself thinking about the future, about what would happen when this magical interlude had to end. when she would need to return to the world that expected Daniel rather than Danielle. But even these thoughts felt different now, less like impending doom and more like a puzzle to be solved with patience and wisdom. "I keep thinking about going back to school," she confessed to Sarah one morning as they worked together in the garden, Danielle wearing her new navy trousers and the cream blouse that somehow made even gardening feel elegant. "About trying to be Daniel again, after being this. And how does that feel? Like trying to put on clothes that no longer fit. Not impossible, exactly, but deeply uncomfortable. Like betraying someone I've worked very hard to get to know." Sarah's hands stilled in their work with the roses. Then perhaps the question isn't how to go back to being Daniel, but how to find ways for Danielle to exist in Daniel's world. "Is that possible? Sweetheart, a week ago you thought none of this was possible. And look at you now, blooming like the most beautiful flower in my garden." Danielle looked down at herself, at the clothes that fit her so perfectly, at the hands that moved with newfound grace, at the reflection she could see in the conservatory windows, showing a young woman who looked completely at home in her own skin. "I suppose I am rather different than I was a week ago. Different, and exactly the same. You're still the sweet, thoughtful, creative soul you always were. You've just found a way to let that soul dress itself in clothes that actually fit." That evening, as they prepared what might be one of their last dinners together in this perfect bubble of acceptance, Danielle found herself studying her reflection in the dining room mirror. The emerald dress, worn because Kirsty had insisted it was too beautiful to save for special occasions, transformed her completely. But more than that, she could see the confidence in her posture, the peace in her expression. "Penny for your thoughts," Sarah said, following her gaze. "I was just thinking, a week ago I was so afraid of being seen, and now I can't imagine wanting to be invisible again." "Why do you think that is?" "Because being seen as myself, as Danielle, feels completely different from being seen as the version of Daniel I was trying so hard to be. When someone sees me now, they're seeing the real me. And the real me, she's not something to be ashamed of. No, darling, she certainly is not." Later, as they sat together in the garden watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Danielle felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. For this place, these people, this chance to discover that the person she'd always been inside could be beautiful and worthy of love. "Thank you," she said softly, the words carrying all the weight of transformation, "for giving me a place to grow, for seeing who I really was before I even knew myself. Thank you for trusting us enough to let us see," Kirsty replied, her voice warm in the darkness, "for being brave enough to bloom. And for showing us," Sarah added, "what it looks like when someone has the courage to live from their most authentic self. You've taught us as much as we've taught you." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and in the garden around them, Sarah's roses released their perfume into the air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new choices, but tonight, in her emerald dress, surrounded by love, finally home in her own skin, Danielle was exactly where and who she was meant to be. Chapter 9. The goodbye approaches the reality hit Danielle on a Tuesday morning as she stood in the kitchen wearing her cream silk blouse and navy skirt, watching Sarah mark days off the calendar with her usual methodical care. 7 small X's marched across the squares, a week of transformation compressed into neat little marks that somehow made the time feel both eternal and impossibly brief. "The bus company called while you were in the shower, darling," Sarah said gently, not looking up from her task. "They'll be delivering your original luggage tomorrow afternoon." Danielle's hands stilled on the teacup she'd been raising to her lips. "Tomorrow." The word hung in the air between them like a storm cloud, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to face. "Tomorrow," she repeated softly, testing how the word felt in her mouth. It tasted of endings and uncertainty, of a future that suddenly seemed much more complicated than it had just moments before. "Yes, sweetheart. Which means we need to start thinking about going back," Danielle finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Kirsty looked up from her morning toast, her eyes immediately filling with understanding and sympathy. "We don't have to talk about it right now if you're not ready." But Danielle shook her head, setting down her teacup with hands that trembled only slightly. Over the past week, she'd learned that avoiding difficult conversations only made them loom larger in the shadows. Better to bring them into the light where they could be examined, understood, perhaps even solved. "No, we should talk about it. We need to talk about it." She looked between Sarah and Kirsty, These two women who had become her anchors in a sea of self-discovery. I can't stay here forever, can I? Much as I might want to. You can stay as long as you need to, darling, Sarah said firmly. But I suspect you're thinking about more than just geography, aren't you? Danielle nodded, moving to the window where she could see the garden in its morning glory, roses heavy with dew, butterflies already beginning their eternal dance among the flowers. The view had become as familiar as her own reflection, a constant source of peace and beauty that had helped ground her through all the changes. I keep thinking about school, about my parents, about all the people who know me as Daniel and expect me to just slot back into that life like nothing's changed. She pressed her palm against the cool glass. But everything's changed, hasn't it? I've changed. I can't just pretend this never happened. Nor should you, Kirsty said firmly, joining her at the window. What you've discovered about yourself, it's not something you can just box up and put away. It's part of who you are. But how do I take this back to a world that doesn't understand? How do I be Danielle in Daniel's life? It was the question that had been haunting her quiet moments for days now, growing more urgent as the end of her stay approached. Here in Sarah's cottage, surrounded by love and acceptance, being Danielle felt as natural as breathing. But out there, in the real world of school and family expectations and curious stares, perhaps, Sarah said slowly, moving to stand beside them at the window, the question isn't how to be Danielle in Daniel's life, but how to create a life where both sides of you can exist authentically. Is that possible? Darling, a week ago you thought any of this was impossible. And look at you now. Sarah gestured at Danielle's reflection in the window glass, poised, graceful, completely comfortable in her own skin. You've already proven that transformation is possible when you have the right support. But I won't have this support out there. I won't have you two, this house, this safety. You'll always have us, Kirsty said fiercely. Distance doesn't change love, Danielle. And you'll be surprised how much strength you can carry with you just knowing that, somewhere, people see you for exactly who you are and celebrate that. They spent the morning in quiet domesticity, each of them processing the looming change in their own way. Danielle found herself moving through familiar routines with heightened awareness, the way sunlight felt on her skin through the silk blouse, the gentle swish of her skirt as she moved around the kitchen, the simple pleasure of arranging fresh flowers with hands that had learned to move with unconscious grace. Every small action felt precious now, weighted with the knowledge that tomorrow these clothes would be packed away. These moments would become memories to be treasured in darker times. I've been thinking, Sarah said as they prepared lunch together, Danielle's hands steady as she chopped vegetables with the precision she'd developed over their time together. About practical things, ways to help you navigate the transition. What kind of practical things? Well, your parents will expect Daniel to come home from this visit, and Daniel will need to go back to school, at least for now. But that doesn't mean Danielle has to disappear entirely. Sarah moved to the dresser where she kept important papers, returning with a small address book and a carefully wrapped package. I've written down all our contact information, mine, Kirsty's, even some friends of ours who understand these kinds of journeys. People you can call when you need to remember that you're not alone. Danielle accepted the address book with reverent care, running her fingers over Sarah's neat handwriting. Names and numbers and email addresses, lifelines to a world where she could be herself. And this, Sarah continued, placing the package in Danielle's hands, is for when you need to remember who you truly are. Inside the careful wrapping, Danielle found a small wooden box, beautifully carved with roses and butterflies. When she lifted the lid, she discovered a collection of treasures. The silver necklace and earrings Kirsty had first lent her, a small bottle of the lavender perfume Sarah wore, a photo of the three of them taken during their shopping expedition, and nestled at the bottom, a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked, carefully unfolding what appeared to be a letter written in Sarah's flowing script. "Something for you to read when things feel impossible, when you forget that you're brave and beautiful and worthy of love exactly as you are." Danielle's eyes filled with tears as she read the opening lines. "My dearest Danielle, if you are reading this, it means you are struggling to remember your own strength. I can't read this now," she whispered, carefully refolding the letter. "I'll fall apart completely. Then save it for when you need it most," Sarah said gently. "But remember, it exists. Remember that your truth is written down in black and white, witnessed and celebrated by people who love you." That afternoon, they tackled the difficult task of deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Danielle's new wardrobe hung in Kirsty's room like a rainbow of possibilities, each piece chosen with such care, each one a small declaration of identity and selfhood. You can't take all of it, obviously, Kirsty said practically as they surveyed the collection. But you shouldn't have to leave all of it either. Together, they selected a few carefully chosen pieces that could be hidden in the bottom of Danielle's original luggage. The lavender nightgown that had become like a security blanket, a pair of the softer jeans that might pass casual inspection, the white blouse that could be explained as a gift if anyone questioned it. Small things, easily concealed but powerful in their ability to remind her of who she really was underneath whatever costume she might need to wear. And this, Kirsty said firmly, lifting the emerald dress from its place of honor, this absolutely comes with you. But when would I ever wear it? Where would I even keep it? You'll find a way, you'll make opportunities. Kirsty's voice was fierce with conviction. This dress, when you wore it for the first time, I saw something in your face I'd never seen before. Pure joy, pure recognition of your own beauty. That's not something you should have to leave behind. They packed these treasures with reverent care, each fold and placement a small act of faith in a future where Danielle would find ways to exist alongside Daniel, hidden but not erased, waiting for moments of safety and self-expression. What about school? Danielle asked as they worked. How do I go back there and pretend to be someone I'm not anymore? Maybe you don't pretend, Kirsty suggested. Maybe you find small ways to let Danielle show through. Longer hair that you refuse to cut. Clothes that are just a little softer, a little more fitted than typical boys' clothing. Small acts of authenticity that help you remember who you are even when you can't fully express it. And if people notice, if they ask questions, then you practice saying, "This is who I am," until it becomes easier than apologizing for existing. That evening, their last full evening together, felt heavy with unspoken emotions. They prepared dinner together as they had so many times before, but every shared glance carried extra weight. Every gentle touch felt like a small goodbye. Danielle had chosen to wear the emerald dress one final time, and she moved through the kitchen like a dancer, her gestures unconsciously graceful as she helped with the meal preparation. The sight of her in that particular dress, in this familiar setting, doing these domestic tasks with such natural elegance, brought tears to Sarah's eyes more than once. "You're so beautiful, sweetheart," she said suddenly, as Danielle arranged flowers for the table. "I mean that in every possible way. Your spirit, your courage, the way you've bloomed over these past days, all of it. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." "I won't," Danielle promised, though they both knew how hard it would be to remember that in the harsh light of a world that didn't always make space for people like her. After dinner, they sat together in the garden, as they had so many evenings before, watching the sky deepen from gold to purple to scattered black. But tonight felt different, sacred somehow, like a ceremony marking the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. "I need you both to know something," Danielle said suddenly, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "This past week, it's been the happiest of my life. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where and who I was supposed to be. For us too, darling," Sarah replied softly. "Having you here, watching you discover yourself, being part of your journey, it's been a privilege beyond words. You've made me a better person too," Kirsty added. "Watching your courage, your willingness to be vulnerable and authentic, it's inspired me to be braver in my own life." They sat in comfortable silence, three women bound by love and understanding, watching the eternal dance of stars above. Tomorrow would bring difficult transitions and uncertain futures, but tonight they had this, perfect peace and unconditional acceptance under the vast embrace of the night sky. "I'm scared," Danielle admitted finally, her voice small in the darkness. "That's natural, sweetheart," Sarah said, reaching for her hand. "Change is always frightening, even good change. But remember, you're not going back to who you were before. You're taking all of this with you, all of this growth and self-knowledge and love. You'll never be alone in the same way again. And we're just a phone call away," Kirsty added. "Literally any time, day or night. If you need to hear your real name spoken with love, if you need reminding of who you truly are, if you just need someone to believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. Promise? Promise." Later, as they prepared for bed, their last night together in this magical bubble of acceptance, Danielle stood before the mirror in her lavender nightgown, memorizing the face that looked back at her. Tomorrow, she would wake up as Daniel, would begin the difficult process of navigating between two identities. But tonight, she was simply and completely herself. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful girl," Sarah whispered as she tucked Danielle in like she had when she was small, but with new understanding of what that endearment truly meant. "Sweet dreams, sister," Kirsty added from the doorway, and the word carried all the weight of family and unconditional love. As sleep finally claimed her, surrounded by the familiar scents of lavender and home, Danielle dreamed of butterflies, thousands of them in every colour imaginable, rising from a garden that looked remarkably like Sarah's, spreading their wings to catch the light as they danced toward an uncertain but beautiful future. Tomorrow would bring goodbyes and new challenges, but tonight she was home, she was herself, and she was deeply, profoundly loved. And perhaps, she thought as consciousness faded into peaceful dreams, that knowledge would be enough to carry her through whatever came next.